Well, good morning, good morning. And in case you're surprised, I'm not Howard Greenwood, but welcome to our webinar this morning, the Jump Weekly webinar. And today you have Paul Jacobs and me, Heather. So delighted to have you all join us. Thank you very much. Howard is busy at a networking event in the Midlands, and Dave is in Portugal with one of his clients. So you've just got the two of us. And today we're going to be talking about managing your performance. I don't do statistics like Howard because I work in HR, so no numbers to start the day. We don't do numbers in HR. We're much too fluffy. And as those of you who know me will know, that's just not true. But I don't do numbers. So we're going to be talking about managing performance. And does your management in your organization lead to consistency of performance, or are you still struggling with the cycle of performance boom and bust? So rock and roller coaster, strap in, here we go. Paul,
yes, hello.
Let's get started. So Paul, how do you think recruitment teams can break away from the traditional cycle of boom and bust, that kind of growth decline that we see in the recruitment industry, to be able to achieve more consistent and sustainable performance?
That's a really good question. Look, I think it's, one of the things about recruitment from a sort of cycle perspective, you look at it sort of annually, is that it is entirely consistent. We have seasonal trends. I sometimes have clients saying to me, December was really bad, or it was really tough. And I say to them, so what, December 25th was a surprise, was it? Christmas Day, you didn't know it was going to happen, huh? I mean, we know every year that December is going to be slightly difficult. And we also know that, if you time the calendar with school holidays and you look at half terms, full terms particularly, it's quieter. So we can pretty much predict, and then you add in whatever sectors you're involved in. So if, for example, you're involved in logistics, you're probably fairly well aware that January and February tend to be very slow periods rather than the lead up into Christmas time. So, if you know your stuff and you look at the calendar, and in addition to that, recognize that you've got people who are not going to be working for 52 weeks of the year for you. They are going to have holidays. They have an occasional day off, sick and so forth. So, factor in, they're probably in the business for 46 weeks. So when you look at that whole thing and you're talking that boom and bust, that kind of roller coaster environment, it's not too difficult to plan ahead and be thinking, what points in the year am I going to be busy? Is there a real opportunity for us to make a lot of money? And let's get the planning around that correct. Let's make sure we have as many people in during those periods as we can. Which periods in the year are we likely to be pretty quiet or even pretty dead? So how do we plan that? And then I think that is going to link into the stuff we're going to talk about regarding metrics, KPIs, and so forth. It is consistent. It's not inconsistent. You can make these plans well in advance. Of course, you can't necessarily account for the weird and wonderful things that tend to happen, as they have done over the last 4 or 5 years, COVID, wars, and so forth. But you can do your level best to try to get in control of it.
Yeah, and I think you can not knee-jerk your response to it. So really looking at the data that's available for your business, and the data for the economy more generally, and for recruitment more generally, because there's lots of data out there, and not knee-jerk it. So having that plan and knowing that this is what I'm going to do in this period, rather than that slightly panicked response that we sometimes see from people. So what specific management practices, Paul, have you come across in your career? I wasn't going to draw attention to your very long career, but what specific management practices have you found to be the most impactful in driving positive business performance?
I think it comes down to a number of things. This is stuff that I know you're so into. So I think a lot of it is to do with culture, the culture that you drive in your business. I think, the best businesses, when it comes to sort of positive, impactful environments, it really comes down to the leadership and the cultural values that they embrace. So, the best businesses are very open in terms of communication. There's very little by way of hierarchy. I mean, there are job titles, but the best businesses where we see leaders they're often the most humble people, the ones in the kitchen washing the dishes and so forth. There's real equality in those environments, and I think it engenders trust. It engenders a sense of team spirit, and people are generally, and in fact almost always, very open and not frightened to ask questions or get involved in discussions where creative thinking is required. So it's a deep question. How do you develop brilliant practices that generate the right results? And I do think it comes down to very open environments, where open conversations, where even criticisms or critiques are taken positively, is the way forward. But it's also very much about the point we just touched on, which is making sure that you're not stumbling into situations, that you're doing everything you can as a leader to be aware of trends in your sectors, to be aware of what your customers are thinking, are planning to do or not planning to do, and making sure that you are steering the ship correctly by ensuring that the navigation is right. You're aware of the perils, the potential perils. You're aware of the potential opportunities, because, to be honest, no one else around you is likely to be as aware as you are. It is your job to be looking ahead in the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and identifying opportunities and as I say, the potential rocks or the perils that might be a problem for you. And if you don't do that, and you don't take the time to step back and look at those situations, then you're definitely going to end up back to the first question of having these ups and downs and these knee-jerk reactions to situations that occur to you.
Yeah. And in fact, somebody who's listening today has put something in the Q&A today. Why is the stigma that January and February are low periods of business? Because that doesn't have to be true with planning. And I think you're absolutely right. And I thank you for that comment. I think it links really closely to what we're saying. With planning, with understanding the trends in your business, with having good data available for what's going on in your business, and knowing in your industry what your trends are likely to be, you can plan for it. So you can plan your activity so that you know that you can do something about the peaks and troughs of the business. I think that's a really good comment, and thank you for that. So you linked there, Paul, to KPIs as well, when you're talking about management practices and driving business performance. And KPIs are a bit like Marmite, aren't they? That you get businesses and industries and leaders who think they're the best thing since sliced bread, and and other people who really hate KPIs. So what examples would you say of KPIs that are misused or misunderstood in recruitment? And how do you identify and implement those KPIs, those metrics that are actually effective in your organization?
Oh gosh, that's such a big question. And I think, once you go into an office and you utter the phrase KPIs, everyone sort of, their eyes dull. It's like looking into the eyes of dead people, basically. They just hate the sound of KPIs, metrics, KPIs. And I think the reason people are fearful of these expressions is they don't really understand the benefits of why metrics, why they can be really helpful. I mean, to give you an example, this afternoon I'm spending time talking to a business abroad about self-management, and I'm talking about KPIs in this conversation because I think that if you understand the inputs that you need to put into your performance and understand what the likely outputs are going to be, and you start to use those disciplines to govern your daily and your weekly and your monthly activities, then ultimately you get where you want to go. Most people don't do this. I've never managed a business where I haven't used and looked at almost endlessly statistics. It doesn't mean that my decisions have always been governed by pure figures, because they're not. But they act as terrific guidelines. If you don't have a rail track, how are you going to get from one station to another? You simply have to know what it's going to take to hit the goals and the revenue targets that you set for the business. And actually, that's not that difficult. You can break it down into inputs and outputs. But one of the most commonly misused, to ask your question, metrics, I think, is something that everyone seems to detest anyway, which is how many sales calls have you made? Well, we drive people to get on the phone, and I suppose I'm guilty of that to an extent. I don't like silent offices, and communication in our industry is everything, but the volume of calls is not relevant. What we should be really interested in is knowing what the outputs are. So how many vacancies do we need to find in order to make the placements that we need to make? How many CVs do we need to send out in order to hit the number of interviews that we need in order to make the placements that we need, and so forth? And, I think everyone pretty much knows what those ratios are. If CVs out, interviews arranged, vacancies taken, client meetings attended, and so forth. We know what those things are, but do we measure them accurately? And, there are people around in every business who are highly accomplished that can get the vacancy numbers they need pretty easily, simply because they've been doing it for so long and they're so professional and adept that they can manage that. And if they can manage those numbers in 5 or 10 calls a day, good for them. I mean, I would still ask them to do more a little bit, but if you're a newbie into the business and it takes you 20 calls to hit your outputs, then so be it. I mean, there are days, as we all know, when you come into the office and somehow the recruitment gods are sprinkling stardust all over you, and every call you make is absolutely outstanding. You just think, I am literally God's gift to recruitment. And then there are other days when everything you do seems to be a step further towards the sort of the precipice. You want literally to jump off the edge of a cliff, because it just gets worse and worse. And we've all had those days. God knows I've had more of those days than I can care to remember. But what do you do in those days? You keep trying, you keep going. And if it means that you have to make 20, 30 calls to get the numbers you'd said you were going to get, then so be it. Other days it's less. So we do sort of put an emphasis on the amount of calls, but I think we misplace the issue. The issue is getting the outputs. And there are days, I say, where it's easy, and some people can do it very easily, and other days we have to really graft at it. Good old-fashioned elbow grease.
Yeah, and I think you're right. So I think for me, there's a couple of things. The reason that KPIs have got this bad name is because in too many situations they're being used in a kind of lazy way. So we have a one-size-fits-all approach where we're talking about inputs, when in fact the most important thing is the outputs. So not the inputs. And we're not thinking in a sophisticated way about how we use KPIs with people at different levels in different organizations. So we come up with a set of lazy KPIs that we try to apply to the whole organization. And there is no doubt that with somebody who's more junior, who's still learning, measuring some inputs can be helpful, right? But we're not ever measuring quality then, if all we're doing is looking at that. And so, as you say, 10 rubbish calls are not going to get the output that you
exactly
want, whereas one great call is. So I think being sophisticated about our KPIs, looking at the data, looking at the person, not really having some one size fits all KPI across your organization. What's valuable for an individual to work on to move the dial in their personal performance, rather than, oh, across my business, everybody's got to do this many sales.
Yeah, exactly right.
It's personalizing the balance between input and output measures to suit the performance metrics of that person in that place that week. And it needs close attention by your managers. And I think that's why they get such a bad name, is because it's lazy.
And I totally agree with that. And also, look, if you happen to have, if we use this as a football analogy, if you've got Georgie Best in your team, and he's got the ability to do something quite spectacular at any moment.
Yeah.
And lots of businesses have the recruitment equivalent of George Best in their side, or the modern day Messi or whatever. Then give them the scope to express themselves, and don't worry
honestly,
too much about.
I have seen businesses make that hideous mistake where they impose a KPI target across the board, and then George Best leaves.
Well, they just strangle these people. Yeah. I mean, if you're lucky enough to have a little superstar in your team, or you have a potential superstar, your job is to support them, to encourage them, to make them feel that they can walk through walls. And then you give them every opportunity and every incentive to go for it. But there are precious few Georgie Bests in this world, so unfortunately, and so
KPIs are a part and parcel of the business, but we sprinkle
exactly.
them with caution, and we use them with care, and we use them in an individualized way, and not in a just across the board sort of approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's just talk about leaders. Most of the people joining us today are leaders of recruitment businesses. So in your experience, Paul, what are some of the common mistakes or pitfalls that recruitment leaders can fall into, or make, that will inadvertently deflect from the overall business performance? What are we seeing that people sometimes get wrong?
Well, I think it's, I said it a bit earlier, that I think that leaders need to be close to their people, very close to their people, and great communication is really the art of great leadership. And particularly if you're having a challenging time, then you amplify the amount of communication. Now, I don't want that to be mistaken with me suggesting it's more micromanagement. I'm talking about being very open with people, and so they understand why certain decisions are being taken, and they're not kept in the dark. I mean, part of this issue around KPIs is, as you said, if it's very rigid and there's been no time taken to coach people to understand why using good old-fashioned mathematics can be very helpful in terms of moving a business forward or your own performance forward. If they don't understand it, and they feel that they're being manhandled, even bullied, then of course they're going to leave the business. So, I think communication and people understanding, and to your point, individually understanding what's going to work for them, but also understanding what's important for the business is super important. And particularly, as I've just said, when you're going through challenging times, amplifying the level of communication is really important. Having that open environment is really important. So I think common mistakes often come about where leaders kind of, I mean, I don't know about you. If I'm under a lot of pressure, if particularly on a personal level, what I tend to do is I tend to go into myself. My level of communication literally drops to zero because I stress and worry about stuff, and I don't express how I'm feeling to other people. That is unfortunately, my default. There you go. There's a confession. There's my default position. I don't think I don't think I'm on my own in that sense. I mean, some people will do a lot of talking when they feel, and it's healthy to do that when they feel stressed. I don't. I just go into myself. I think I see that in a lot of leaders I work with. When they're under a lot of pressure, they tend to withdraw into themselves and don't communicate to the extent they should do, when in fact the opposite is what you should do under those circumstances. And if you've ever been in a situation where life's been a bit difficult at work, business has been tough, if you have opened up and not necessarily worried people, but expressed to them why we need to do certain things and how we're going to get ourselves out of this conundrum, people often surprise you and throw their backs into really moving the dial forward. And I think that lack of communication is one of the key mistakes that people make in these situations. But I also think that it is about, if you're going to ask people to follow that metrics, let that metrics trail, then you need to inform them as to why it's working, or indeed why it isn't working. And to your earlier point, it isn't just looking at the numbers. You've got to look at the quality of what's going on underneath the surface. The numbers tell you one thing, but you've got to dig further. If you're hitting the client meeting numbers, for example, but you're not pulling in the vacancies or the temporary assignments or the contractor opportunities that you're looking for, something's not right. It's not the number of meetings. You're clearly doing that. What about the quality of the meetings? What's going on in those conversations? What information are we getting? How much, how deep are we digging into our clients' needs? Are we listening properly to what clients are telling us? Are we going back with, there's a million questions you're going to ask yourself, which leads to people like you and me helping indeed with coaching and training and development and so forth. So the numbers are very useful. They give you a steer, but you have to dig underneath. So again, a mistake is to look at the numbers and the numbers alone and not get beneath the surface to figure out what's working. And my last point here, and you said it yourself, and I'm going to just
clearly not stressed today, Paul.
Not stressed at all. But my last point here is you can't have a broad brush approach. You said this. It's no good saying the whole business is crap at doing X, Y, and Z. That's not true. There are people that are doing very well in certain areas. You can't, and those people that are doing well, when they hear those negative comments, are just sitting there thinking, what is going on? I'm doing a great job here and you're tarring me with the same brush. That's not right. So you have to, again, figure out where are the weak links? Who do we need to help? And how do we get the people that do certain things really well doing more of those things really well? Because the quickest way to success is to lean into people's strengths and get them to do more of those things, not necessarily apply huge amounts of energy into getting people that are very poor at certain things to improve with, or you want them to, because no matter what you do, their ability isn't going to move up that much.
Your
Whereas if you
80-20 rule, isn't it?
Exactly, that's the thing.
Yeah. So I would add another pitfall that I've seen some leaders fall into. So some of the people who are leading recruitment businesses, particularly on the smaller end of the scale, it's not so far in their history that they were on a desk themselves and that they were recruiters. And so as their business grows and they move into a leadership role and they spend more time working on their businesses, not in their businesses, the pitfall I see sometimes is that recruitment leaders will panic slightly and get back in to working in their business. So they might really get in the way of their team. And actually, when that business is under stress and pressure, and there are challenges and difficulties, what that business needs is not for the leader to go back to sitting on a desk and doing the recruiters' jobs for them. It needs them to actually step up and be the leader that that business needs. So work on all of the things that will deliver on your strategy. Make sure your strategy is right. Work on the development of your managers in your business. Work on the overall roadmap that you're working on, but actually do the stuff that's working on your business that's going to move it forward, not shrink your job and suddenly start working in the business and thinking, well, I've got to be on a desk because nobody else is doing it. And actually they do the opposite of what they need to do. And for me, that's the commonest pitfall I see, understandably, because inevitably great leaders of recruitment businesses have come from that background themselves. They were on a desk, they were a great recruiter, and that's why they started their own business. But actually that instinct's a massive pitfall. You don't want to go back to doing what you did before. You want to step up and really take a leadership role in that business, and drive performance through your teams, not for them.
And I totally agree with you. And I mean, it's understandable. You're right that to say, look, we're in a pickle. I'm just got to jump on this desk and see if I can get something moving, because that's what I do. I do it brilliantly, and I can do it better than anybody else. And I can understand that. I do understand that. But you've got
a huge mistake.
It is a mistake. Much better to say, look, I'm going to go and sit with. If I am going to hit a desk, I'll go and sit and help Heather.
Yeah.
Let her sit with me. We'll be, let's be a tag team for a week, and let's see if I can help Heather a bit. Okay, that kind of helps me a little bit in the sense that I feel like I'm back to doing what I know I do really well, but at least I'm guiding and teaching somebody. The other thing I think here is the old comment about delegation, because again, one of the, I think, pitfalls, and we were talking about this before the webinar, is that what people tend to do is say, well, I'll do it all myself, because I know how to do it and I can do it quickly and I can do it probably better than anyone. And therefore nobody ever learns anything. And in fact, what they tend to do, and you can actually physically see it, is they literally sit there, your colleagues, with their arms folded, thinking, oh, well, you're going to do this, aren't you? Because you've always done this. And they're happy for you to do that because it's less aggro for them and they're not stretched or challenged. And instead, what happens is you end up getting yourself into a complete frenzy, trying to spin every plate on your own. And if you turn around and look at everybody, none of them look as stressed and as frenzied as you at all. They're all sitting there with their arms folded, looking at you, going, "Look at you! You're worried. I'm not."
I was doing this yesterday with a group of managers in a business. Anybody who's interested in this book, it's part of the 1 Minute Manager series, which are a fantastic series of books, but it's specifically called The 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey, and it's about exactly that. As leaders, when we're in moments of stress and the business is under pressure, we take all this stuff on us rather than effectively prioritizing and delegating using the people around us. And that's really what I mean. We need to be more like leaders and less like recruiters when our business is in stress, because we're getting in the way of what our actual job is, which
Yeah.
is to enable the people in our teams to be more effective.
Yeah.
So for me, that's the pitfall I think that people fall into.
And when you do approach people and delegate to them and say, could you help me here? I'd be really grateful, a bit of schmoozing here. And, you're great at this and so forth. Look at their body language.
Yeah.
They're really pumped. They're really thrilled that you've leaned in to ask them. And actually, often it can be, and in my experience, sometimes most junior person, and you're saying, look, I've noticed you do this brilliantly, and I'd be really grateful if you could take this off my plate. And you do a better job than me anyway, whatever you say. And really, me? Thank you. And it's quite astonishing at how people will step up. And I remember being a young guy, and that was about 100 years ago. For you saying anything, Heather, I remember being a young guy and being asked to do
As
certain
recently as
things.
that.
And I'm feeling I wasn't given promotion because I was being asked to do those things or more money. But I remember thinking, you chose me. You could have chosen anybody. You chose me, and it made me feel great. It boosted my confidence.
Yeah. So we talked about KPIs earlier. I think one of the interesting things you get to do with KPIs is about balancing the need for performance metrics and accountability, which is really important, we know.
Yeah.
But we also want to foster a culture of innovation and creativity in our recruitment team.
Yeah.
So how do we balance that need for performance metrics, for measures, for that kind of KPI based management, the individual accountability, with creating a culture where you can have innovation and creativity, which is really the only way we're going to grow?
I totally agree. Look, I mean, we said it already that the metrics are a guideline. It's a graph on a wall. It's a dashboard. It's showing you. It's giving you signals. It's showing you trends. But it doesn't give you the answers necessarily. It's giving you the hard facts, but it's not giving you the answers. So, for example, back to my client meeting situation, so if the client meetings have dropped away and you're noticing that your vacancies are draining and the temp assignments or the contractor opportunities are dropping, so forth, well, clearly there's a big signal there. I would use the metrics and the KPIs to as a, if you like, a flag, and I would be saying to my colleagues, what are we going to do about this? And I would be encouraging them to come up with ideas and thoughts about how we're going to turn a trend, and a negative trend, into a positive situation. What are we going to do? Who's got ideas? How do you think we can tackle this? The people that work alongside you often have a greater insight into what's going on in your markets than you do. They're talking to candidates every day. They're talking to clients. Hopefully, they're talking to clients every day. They're probably going on more meetings than you are. They should have an insight into what's going on. You don't have to agree with their views, by the way. I mean, actually, the best ideas come about from a really constructive conversation that starts with somebody saying, I was thinking we could do X. And someone else says, yeah, that's a good idea. We could also do X, Y, and Z. And eventually a hybrid solution comes out of somebody's basic concept that you think, as the leader, this is great. We can do something with this. No idea is a bad idea. We know that. Any idea, even the craziest ideas, can actually be contorted into something very original and quite interesting. And even the craziest ideas sometimes are worth having a go with. Any idea at the end is better than stagnation and procrastination. You've got to do something. If you're seeing something happening, sitting and talking about it and not doing anything is a decision. Doing nothing is a decision. And that decision is going to make certain that whatever negative trends are occurring are going to continue or worsen. You have to do something. And I've been in a million meetings over the years where we've asked questions, what do we think we could do? And someone comes up with an idea and someone comes up with another idea, and no one likes any of the ideas. And my view about all of those situations is, listen, if we can't think of a great idea, let's go with the best of the bad ideas, because any idea is better than doing nothing. Sitting on our hands is guarantee of failure. So, in the absence of a better idea, let's go with this. So I think it's about creating that environment where you're asking people to be creative and think a lot about what we could do. And my best example, I've said this many times, is that, back in the Office Angels days, we were well known for giving out chocolate angels. That idea came about from one of our receptionists, I can't remember which office, saying that she'd looked at a Christmas tree and thought, oh, those chocolate angels are lovely. I wonder if we could give them out at Christmas to our clients. And that morphed into something that we ended up doing every day of every working week, giving out chocolate angels, often cold calling clients, giving these chocolates out. And I can't even describe to you how much money we made out of getting this pretty rotten chocolate to people. Everybody loves chocolate. And, we got client meetings galore off of doing those things. It's kind of the stuff of fables these days. But it came from one of the youngest and most junior members of the entire business. She had this idea that morphed into this kind of thing we did for 20 years or whatever it was. So, my view is that's where it starts. Ask people what they think.
There's been a brilliant one actually recently on LinkedIn with a business that I follow on LinkedIn. And their CEO had been having a conversation about how were they going to get the foot in the door of more businesses to generate business. And somebody in their office came up with this bright idea that they'd send an old trainer. They went around all the charity shops and bought up loads of shoes, right? And they sent people a shoe to say, "Can I get a foot in the door?"
I love
right?
that.
And it became this amazing talking point on LinkedIn, and it's hilarious. And he's claiming to have got loads of new meetings with businesses because it's fun. But it just came from somebody making a joke in the office about a foot in the door. Let's send them a shoe. So daft ideas can actually end up being amazing ideas. So, and this question, Howard writes these questions for us just to let you in on a little sneaky bit of information,
which we don't understand most of the time,
and we never understand what he's talking about. But what's interesting with this question, I think, is the idea that performance metrics and accountability is the opposite of fostering a culture of innovation and creativity. And I don't think they are two sides. Right? I don't think they are two different things. I think
they're conjoined.
Good use of performance metrics and accountability helps to create a culture of innovation and creativity. And there's loads of evidence that organizations that actually have a diversity and inclusion strategy are very creative and innovative, right? And that is because when you include people and you make them feel safe, they feel able to be innovative and creative, and they can talk to you about their ideas and share them in it. So you need to create that sense of safety. Well, if you're using performance metrics in a fair, open and individualized way, and people are individually and fairly and transparently accountable for their actions, of course you're going to create a culture where people feel enabled to be creative and to be innovative, because it's by its very nature, it's fair. So I don't think that those things are mutually exclusive. I think they are absolutely two sides of the same coin.
Agreed.
And creativity and innovation is really important, as Paul said, but we have to do that by creating a culture where people feel included, safe and able to share and have daft ideas that people aren't going to laugh at, because actually the daft ideas turn out to be
like the trainer idea. It's a brilliant idea.
It's fantastic, isn't it? And what a great LinkedIn series it made as well. So it was very funny. Have you seen any emerging trends, Paul, or best practices that you think are really going to influence performance outcomes in the near future? Is anything that you've seen on your rounds? We're all off to Rec Expo next month. So what sort of emerging trends and best practices in recruitment managers do you think are going to influence performance outcomes in the future?
It's good. Well, look, I think if you talk about the Rec Expo, for example, the one thing that is really noticeable these days when you go to these expos is just walking around the hall and having a look at how many new AI type suppliers have emerged in the industry. In the old days, not that many years ago, you'd walk around the hall and you'd see trade associations, and there'd be there's some lawyers and accountants and the usual sort of support services into the industry. Now you can't, you're literally tripping over tech suppliers into the industry. It's astonishing, and they all look great. And we do have a tendency in our industry to these conversations pretty regularly. Try and buy the next shiny thing. Oh, that looks good. That would make a really huge difference. Let's buy it. And we buy stuff and we don't use it properly and we waste money and so forth. I mean, my answer to this question really, and it's going to be really dull, is please use your CRM system properly. I know that that's not exactly innovative, is it? But most agencies, if not all of them, have CRMs, and they don't, in the main, use them particularly well. I mean, I've had a debate the other day with a client where it became very apparent that the people in the business are not inputting their calls or their details onto the system as they should be. So therefore, if you're trying to draw out the metrics, for example, what you're getting is inaccurate information. How do you manage a business with inaccurate information? You're pulling stuff out and thinking, oh God, we've got an issue here. But actually, when you dig in, you find they're not entering stuff properly. They're not putting down all their calls or whatever. So it makes a complete nonsense of what you're trying to do. I mean, we've spent this webinar talking about the importance of looking at trends and looking at metrics, and I stand by that. But it's only useful if the information you're looking at is accurate or pretty accurate. But if it's miles out because people are sort of getting away with not putting information on the system, you've got a problem. I also, and it sounds really awful to say this, but at some point, people are going to leave your company. Some hopefully stick around for a very, very long time, but people do come and go. If ultimately you're not getting them to put the information on the system when they've gone, and they've gone with all that information in their heads, and you've got nothing in your system that gives you any guidance in terms of conversations, meetings with clients, and so forth. And so therefore, they often walk away with those relationships because you can't manage them. You've got no information. So I know that it sounds a bit dull and boring to say this, but having a CRM, which is not cheap, CRMs are not cheap, but they're brilliant if you use them correctly. If you want to know emerging practices, let's talk about that. But I also think let's look at good old-fashioned recruitment methodology, what we call old school recruitment. There's nothing wrong with old school recruitment methodology and processes. They rock. They still rock. They're called old school because they flip in work. So if you have a combination of old school recruitment methods, which we've spent quite a lot of time talking about, combined with using your CRM system really effectively, then you have the foundations for a great business. And yes, if you want to then enter those expo halls and go and buy the next shiny thing, good for you, and it's great. But please don't do that until you're making good use of what you've already got.
Yeah, you've got to have clean data. You've absolutely got to have clean data. Any of the technology that we've got available to us is only going to work if we use it effectively and the data we put in it. AI, massive trend, right? Really, really big. I do think it's a game changer, having seen some of the sophisticated things that it can do, but it's only going to work if we use it properly. So we harness it effectively. We've got good data to tack it onto, and we've got some good disciplines in our business about how we're using, if we're going to invest in technology. The trend that I've been really interested to watch is more and more recruitment businesses are genuinely talking about the recruiter as a consultant, about being subject matter experts. And I've seen a real trend to us as an industry believing that actually we do know what we're talking about. We have got a lot of expertise, and that we are as an industry getting much better at valuing ourselves and valuing our service. And for me, I think that's a real trend to watch, is how do we keep going on the journey away from being a grudge purchase to being really focused on how do we give candidates a fantastic experience of working with us? How do we give clients something other than just being a body shop? How do we become part of their talent acquisition strategy and solutions? And I've loved watching that trend emerge over the years I've been, it was a lot of years being in recruitment. And I think that's got the possibility to really make a huge difference in the sustainability of our businesses and our relationships with our clients and our candidates and our people.
And I couldn't agree more with you. The advent of AI means, and this is increasing, that we're going to give the gift of time to our people to be, as you rightly say, proper consultants. And it's not about what jobs have you got. It's about what challenges have you got, Mr. Client? What can we do to help you? Which will broaden the conversation. to the extent that eventually leading recruitment businesses will be offering more than great candidates. We should be moving towards a situation where we are looking at layered approaches to supporting people inside businesses who are charged with the responsibility of effective manpower management. What else can we provide them above what we do, which is...
do we understand their problems, and have we got the solution that will solve them? Yeah. So it's a really nice question that's come up. Any tips for improving the CRM usage and attitudes towards admin? So this is it's a really interesting one, and honestly, the questioner is not given their name, but honestly, it could be anybody listening, because it's a problem we all have, and there's been some fantastic memes actually on LinkedIn about this, where you spend six-figure sums putting in CRMs, and then recruiters use spreadsheets, right? So
yes, they do.
So it's very topical, and it's on our problem. For me, this is about and Paul, I'll let you add your 2 pence afterwards. But for me, this is about, have some discipline in this about your business. Yeah. So pay attention to it. Make sure your managers know that they are going to be judged on how well their teams use the technology that you have available to. If you ignore it, and then suddenly it's only when your marketing company want data that you suddenly realize they haven't got any, right? Pay attention to it. Have some discipline with your managers about it. Make sure that you explain to people why they have to do the admin, why that is part of the job. Yeah. Why is the data in the CRM important, and what's in it for them if they do it properly? Link compliance to your commission schemes. So it isn't just about having the booking, it's about administering the booking properly, so that we invoice right first time, and build all of those quality elements into your rewards systems, whether it's bonuses that sit alongside commission or whatever. Do that, because we only get good attitudes and usage of CRMs by paying attention to it. So those would be my advice on that.
I think they're brilliant tips. I'd add 2 things. Well, I'll probably support 2 things that you've said. One is that I think that the key negative word in the question, and this is what everybody thinks about CRMs, is admin. So I think it's a shift of mindset, because no one wants to do admin. Who wants to sit and do admin? You know, we all want the adrenaline pump of working in recruitment, don't we? Talking to people, doing the deals, and, you know, it's all that kind of stuff. Who wants to sit and do boring paperwork, admin? Nobody. So let's not call it admin. It's not admin. It's what you said. It's information that's going to support our ability to be successful. It's retraining our thinking around this. It's not about paperwork for the sake of flipping paperwork. To be fair, the second element of what I was about to say is that obviously, and you raise this point, there's a lot of legislation now around recruitment, rightly so, and there's a lot of due diligence, for example, around law and legislation and so forth, and we have to abide by that. So yes, some of it is regrettably stuff we have to do, but I think by and large the information that we're putting on the system is more about how do we increase our productivity, how do we get better outputs, how do we make more money. And I think it's a kind of mindset retrain. Let's not think of it as admin. Let's train our people to understand why getting information down will help them make more money.
Okay, lovely. And then we've got one last question to slot in before we do our last question, because we're going to run out of time. So this attendee would like to talk more about KPIs in terms of how to make them non-candidate focused if the candidate is not the driver of the business. So client focused KPIs or other KPIs that are non-candidate focused. Paul, any immediate thoughts about that?
I think KPIs sit in 2 camps. I think, it's absolutely candidates. I mean, we often talk about that, sending CVs out. I did, and I have said several times in this webinar, you've got to be looking at it from a client perspective. Anyone that knows me well knows that I've always believed, and I have the track record to back this up, that it's about getting in front of clients consistently every single week, and making sure that you're very visible with your clients and prospect clients. And so I do agree. I think there's 2 elements of the metrics. One is definitely client-based, one is candidate-based. But an interesting point I'd make here is that we do have a tendency in our business, our industry to focus on vacancies, filling vacancies. I mean, you go into any recruitment business and there's a vacancy board or there's a dashboard, and we talk endlessly about filling roles. When in fact, I think that whilst that's clearly very important, I don't hear anywhere near as much discussion around what we're going to do with good quality candidates, how we're going to take candidates to market. And I have these conversations all the time. Who are your key candidates this week? Who are you going to be taking to market? Who are you going to represent in the market? And I get blank looks because they don't do that. So I think that there are certain elements around KPIs, and you said, and you're right, link it to the reward system as well. But I think that there are different shades. It's about looking at the variations in the metrics. But I'm going to come back to this point. The guys have got to understand why we want them to do things so that they do it willingly.
So one of the things I've seen done really well with non-candidate KPIs is with client mapping. So actually understanding and trying to find a way to measure what the depth of your relationship is with your client. So I've seen, recruitment consultants get really excited because they had 10 vacancies from a particular client, but then actually if you look at their when you do a bit of due diligence, you found out their agency spend that they had 150 vacancies and you only had 10 of them. So it's about, I would do some KPIs around the depth of our understanding of our clients. So as well as your standard client review meetings, which I really agree with you, Paul, we should be measuring people on how often they are in front of their clients, how often they are, but it's about quality too. So do you map your client? Do you understand who all the decision makers are in that client? Have you got relationships at multiple levels, or have you only got relationships with individual hiring managers? Are you into the C-suite at all? Yeah, so I would be looking at using maybe some of the Miller-Hyman type tools to map your clients, map your client relationships, and create plans for how you get more sophisticated, deeper relationship. There's a couple of really good books. If anybody wants to drop me an email, I'll tell you what the books are, or contact me through LinkedIn. There's some great books on how you map clients well to build strong, deep relationships. And Paul, we're going to run out of time, so very, very quickly. How do you use good performance management to positively impact morale, retention, and overall success of recruitment businesses?
Listen, it's all about the things we've said. It's be supportive, be encouraging, create an open environment, encourage people to come up with creative thoughts and ideas, listen to their ideas and thoughts, step back from the business, make sure you know where the company is going, plan appropriately. Make sure that you're not consistently dealing reactively with what's going on around you. Try as best you can to be positive and proactive, create a fun environment. And I think if you do those things, people will stick around, especially if you create career opportunities for them. Then the opposite of what I've just said creates that turnstile, people coming and going.
Yeah. Performance management is not a stick to beat people with. Performance management is at the core of your business. It's fair, it's transparent, and it's about enabling the people in your business to be as successful as they can with every tool at your disposal. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for the participation today. We've had some really great questions, and it's lovely to see people engaging in it. Lovely to have so many of you on the call, and we'll see you all next week.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.